All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mark Molina, CEO of Molina Leadership Business Development Solution. I am very grateful and thankful and excited to have with us this evening a cohort of leadership from the Black Unity Movement. I'm going to begin by reading their bio so we know who we're talking to. Morgan, if you could give a little wave to the people for those that don't know you. Morgan Fresh Henley. He identifies as he, him, his, as Black. He is into writing, dancing, producing, photography, videography, and designing. He is a cinema student at the University of Oregon. He has worked as a freelance photographer since November of 2018, working with Brixton International, Forever 21, Blueface, and the University of Arizona. His family was part of the civil rights movement during the 1960s in Birmingham, Alabama. He grew up listening to the stories of his family's fight against racial injustice and believes in fighting for what he believes in the unity and the mission of the Black Unity. I'm sorry I messed that up a little bit. Why he's working with Black Unity is their mission, their sense of purpose, and fighting for civil rights. Welcome, Morgan. We appreciate you being here this evening, sir. Tyshawn, if you could give us a little wave so people that don't know you, thank you. Tyshawn is 20 years old, pronouns he, him. His favorite colors are red and purple. Favorite hobbies are fashion, music, basketball, and photography. He's a full-time activist, full-time college basketball player, and full-time worker. He has always been passionate about fighting for civil rights and educating people. He loves to dress up and taking photos. His dream is to live in a world where everyone can determine their own destiny, no matter their skin color, gender, or sexuality. He identifies as an African-American man. Welcome, Tyshawn. We thank you for being here, sir. And we have Kenia. She's not in the photo right now, but she is listening on the phone. She will be joining us shortly. Pronouns are she and her. Her favorite colors are light pink and gold. Her favorite hobbies are singing, art, and playing basketball. She is a small business owner doing nails currently. She would love to be a celebrity nail tech someday. She is a mom of a 3-year-old girl. She always has had a passion for human rights and takes pride in vocalizing her experiences as a Black woman. She would like to go back to school for art and music, and she identifies as a Jamaican American. And lastly, we have Martin. Martin, give us a little wave there. Thank you, sir. He, him, his favorite color is blue. His hobbies are painting, biking, music performance. He is an activist, artist, and illustrator from Southern California. He enjoys working in mental health and strives to one day be a mental health provider who runs his own program. Gentlemen, and Kania, I know you're listening. Did I say that right, Kania?
Kanaya.
Kanaya, sorry, Kanaya. I have a granddaughter named Anaya, so let me just remember Kanaya. So thank you, gentlemen. Kanaya, thank you. I know you're listening. Thank you all for being here. We greatly appreciate your time. Thank you for the opportunity and availing yourselves to the next couple of hours to have a conversation about each one of you, about your sense of purpose and mission with Black Unity. I know all of you have received the questions in advance. But before we get to the list of questions, and I would like to get to them because all of the questions you have received have come from community members, community leaders, and they would like to hear from all of you directly. And I want people to hear in your words, your voices, your stories. So with that said, let me just ask a preliminary question. Martin, I guess I'll start with you, and then we can move to the other two gentlemen if they want to answer at all. Tell us a little bit about the mission of Black Unity Movement.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the mission of Black Unity. When we first got together as a group, we were just individuals who were going to protest, who saw a need for the community of color to really reclaim their voices, to really reclaim, the identity of this movement. Because one of the things that we know about Eugene and one of the things that we know about in Oregon is that there's not a lot of people of color up here in Oregon, and there's specifically not a lot of Black people, African Americans, Haitians, Africans, Jamaicans up here who can really, find a way to make their voice heard. And so as we were going to these protests, as we were learning about the way the community saw these things, we felt there was a need to amplify these voices and make sure that they were able to be heard. Because one of the things that we realize here in Oregon is it's very different from the rest of the country. Some people might call it a white utopia. Some people might call it a little bit different, but the entire point of it is that we need to unify together, and we need to make sure that all these that we're raising the voices of all of these individuals, because our target is to make sure that we're addressing the police brutality, the stigmatization, the bias that they treat our communities of color, and we're creating that equitable change that we need in this community.
Very good, thank you. Morgan, would you like to add anything to that, sir? You're on mute.
I think Martin hit it right on the head with exactly what we're trying to do with helping the community and really trying to prop up the people of color in the area and let them know that they're not the only ones who are trying to make a difference.
Very good, thank you. Tyshawn, would you like to add anything, sir?
I think Martin hit it on the head.
Very good. And is Kanaya still there? Can she hear?
Kanaya, did you have anything you wanted to add? She's good.
Okay, very good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into the questions. This is going to be, it's going to take the 2 hours to get through these. And I thank you all once again for being here. So these questions that have come in, they're not in any particular order. They are from community members and community leaders, residents of Springfield and Eugene. But before I begin, how many protests has the Black Unity movement led now in the Eugene area and the Springfield area? James?
Honestly, I don't think any of us are 100% sure how many protests we've led. Like, we've led a very a large amount of protests. So and we've been protesting for a long while now as a group. So I don't think any of us are 100% sure, even ballpark wise, how many protests we've done since the beginning as a group. Also, Kanaya says she requested to other shit. Okay, yeah. But yeah, I don't think any of us are sure, speaking for a group, how many protests we've done. Martin?
I can probably give a ballpark estimate of combined protests and events. We've probably led about 15 or so of these protests throughout the community.
I know that there's been several here in Springfield, and there's confusion as to who is leading all of them. There is a distinction. There's a distinction that when Black Unity leads a protest, it is more controlled, so to speak. There's not so much aggression. There's a more positive message. There's this ongoing connection or characteristic of the protests that your organization has led in Springfield, as opposed to some of the characteristics of some of the other led protests. And that's what's communicated about Black Unity leadership in regards to the protests that they lead. Did we lose Kanaya? Looks like we lost her. All right, so I'm going to just start with the questions here as they came in. So you led some protests. Your organization has led protests, multiple protests as you've described, probably all over the state and maybe some other places. I don't know. But let's talk about Springfield right now. Let's talk about some of the protests and post-protest effects. Can you describe? There she is, Kanaya. Thank you. Can you describe the actions that the mayor and our city councilors have taken with you to date to gain an understanding of your organization and its mission and the goals you desire to accomplish? I guess, Morgan, we'll start with you. I see you guys from left to right, so that's how I'll ask.
I don't know. There's some people in the community that feel that. Could you say the question one more time? Sorry.
Yes, yeah, no problem. Can you describe the actions that the mayor and our city councilors have taken with you, your organization that is to date, to gain an understanding of your organization and its mission and the goals you desire to accomplish?
Yeah, there are some people in our community that um, many feel are underrepresented, and we think that many of the city leaders in Springfield are just waiting for activism to occur, and it sucks because there's a certain amount of people who just don't like. We understand that when you just sit around and wait, nothing ends up happening. And when you don't put pressure on these community leaders to actually try and accomplish anything and do something and move things forward, everything just stagnates. And there's a lot of people of color like myself personally who have lived in Springfield and have felt what it's like to live in somewhere and you not feel safe. And when the leaders don't reflect, like they say they want to help people feel safe and protect the people who live in the area, and then they don't do anything or actually move any policies or laws forward to actually show that, it's really disappointing because it feels like you're getting spit in the face.
Okay, thank you. Martin, did you want to add to that answer?
So I really think that when we're looking at this question, we really have to look at how long Black Unity has been as an established group. As of this month, we've had 2 solid months of blend of protests and events that we put on through the city of Eugene. One of those being the Juneteenth event that happened back on June 19th. Now, one of the things that we noticed at this Juneteenth event is that the mayor of Eugene actually took the time to calm down, look around, understand what the focus that we're trying to create at this event, and really take that time afterwards to connect with the community. In Springfield, we've posted about four of these blended events. 3 of them are protests, and 1 was a public forum. But one of the things that I think is really telling of the community is the fact that aside from yourself, none of the public officials there have actually reached out to us. None of them have actually tried to understand our mission. None of them have really tried to understand the goals that we accomplish. And as a matter of fact, when we go into Springfield, where a lot of our members and a lot of people of color in this community live, one of the big things that we learn is that when these people of color try to create a voice, it's shut down by the large majority of the community, whether they are All Lives Matter or whether they're extremists within the All Lives Matter camp. They shut down those voices. And so until the violence that occurred at the Thurston protest, from the police and from the counter protesters who showed up, and the pressure that was placed on the mayor directly after that event, she never made a statement. So there's not really a way for us to answer that question because there was never a dialogue to begin with.
Before I go to you, Tyshawn, I just want to say that did you receive the email that the Springfield City Club wants to meet with your organization and have you
Yes.
as a program? So doors
Yes.
are starting to open. So this is a really good time, and this dialogue is going to be really useful. So thank you. Tyshawn, did you want to add to anything that's been said, sir?
Yeah, so like Martin said, like there hasn't been any dialogue between us and the city council or mayor from Springfield. And here the problem with that is we've been to Springfield a couple of times, and so we know for sure that she knows that we've been there and that we're trying to make a statement there. And the main problem is people are getting upset about like the violent protests and stuff like that. But without that happening, without us going to Thurston, like no one would have took notice in what we were trying to do. And so it's super annoying to us, like a peaceful protesting group, that violence has to occur just for our message to get out to the mayor and to the city council. Like, that's super frustrating because we want them to hear us. They don't hear us when we're peaceful protesting, but they hear the people that are breaking stuff, and they're frustrated at that. And we're trying to make these changes, and we're trying to put pressure on the city council, the police, and the mayor to make these changes without things getting violent. Because if these changes are happening, these groups won't have to go out there and break stuff. So that's the main problem with us not having dialogue with the mayor. If she knows our message, and the city council knows our message, and the people that live there know our message, it'll be a lot easier and fast tracked, and things won't get broken, and there won't be so much crazy stuff happening if she just stepped up and wanted to have this dialogue. And it's sad that it took all this just for that to happen.
Very good. Thank you. Good to see you again, Kanaya. Glad you could get logged back on. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I didn't hear anything because of the fact that my phone has been completely out.
I'll ask you the question again, okay? So the same question that your cohorts have answered. Can you describe the actions that the mayor and, speaking of Springfield, and our city council have taken with you to date to gain an understanding of your organization and its mission and the goals you desire to accomplish?
So you're asking me what the mayor has done to understand us better?
Or any of the city leadership? Yes, ma'am.
I don't think the mayor in Springfield has done much to understand us. By what I've heard, it doesn't seem like, I don't know. I feel like the Eugene mayor has done a lot more to understand us, and that really shows, to be honest, because in this time we need people to be listening, and people that aren't listening aren't helpful.
Okay, very good. Now, we have a lot of questions here, but I want to go back to something Tyshawn said, because I want to make sure that the community hears your story in your voice and in your words, because that's really the most important thing. And so Tyshawn mentioned about the protests that got violent in Thurston, that until that conflict, until that moment of difficulty, he felt like maybe the organization hadn't been heard, that your objectives weren't taken seriously, or maybe you weren't taken seriously as BIPOC leaders. And that night, speaking of that particular protest, there's so much confusion about who led it and what organizations were in charge or responsible. Kanai, you're right here still in front of me. I'll start with you. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
This is on the Wednesday night Thurston protest?
Yes, ma'am.
So I tried to explain as much as I could that this was Black Unity that was leading that protest, and that Black Unity is extremely peaceful. We have never broken anything. We've never looted. We do not condone that behavior. I even told it to the counter protesters the night before when the police pulled me over. And I explained to the neighbors and everything that we are peaceful. We're a peaceful group. And I don't know how many times I have to say that for people to actually like listen and think like we actually are peaceful. I think that we have a good track record though of showing that. And I think despite what happened that night, we tried to keep the peace as much as we could. We were unarmed and we used our voices to be heard instead of threatening other people.
Well, I explained to the rest of your leadership cohorts here that one of the characteristics of Black unity within the city is that when Black unity leads a march, it's disrupt, not destroy. It lacks it doesn't have the aggressive characteristics. And so that arena of how you lead has differentiated your efforts and your energy from some of the other things that have transpired here. And personally, for clarity's sake, I'm really grateful for this conversation, because I don't know the difference between Black unity, Black Lives Matter, Black liberation. There's a lot of different groups that we hope to have conversations with. So I appreciate that. Okay, Martin, sir, you want to go?
Yeah, so speaking to the who was leading the protest, it was a Black unity-led protest. And I think one of the things that people people in that community don't realize is that when we're planning a protest, we aren't planning a protest the night before going out and just jumping in, hoping that people are going to follow the message of disrupt, not destroy. These protests, this protest planning takes a couple of weeks actually. Where we're setting these routes, where we're talking to the community, where we're trying to see where these areas of violence will most likely occur, so that we can actually avoid those areas and keep all of the protesters safe. Because one of the pinnacle achievements of our protests in the past is that they're always educational. You're always learning something from the protests that you didn't know about the community. You're learning something that you didn't know about the Black lives. You're learning something you didn't know that about Black voices. And when we're trying to differentiate ourselves from these different groups, it's just like you said, different groups have different tactics. And our group is all about that educational protest piece. The only way you can create a space to have education is to have peace. And so on that Wednesday night Thurston protest, we had started planning that protest at the beginning of the week. When we were looking around that community, when we were receiving information from the folks that live there, we had learned that there were going to be a large amount of counter protesters there. So in order to make sure that that didn't end up in violence, we ended up changing the route of our protest so that we can continue that peaceful message and make sure that it happened. But the reason why it ended in violence is because we were met by a group of officers who didn't want to listen, who didn't want to be educated, who wanted to assert a certain level of dominance in their community that really didn't need to happen. They didn't know our route. They didn't know any of these things. And so that's why that protest actually ended in violence, is because, those police, made an assumption. They created this they created this air of bias within that community that Black unity was coming to be violent. And so we weren't able to, create that space for educational protests like we usually do, because there was no dialogue in the moment. There wasn't dialogue on their side. And then when they forced us away after, beating us, there was no dialogue between the All Lives Matter group. It was an assumption that we came there to loot, we came there to be violent. But like I said, we've had 4 events in the Thurston protests. Of those 4 events, we've never been violent. We've always been educational. We've always been trying to, push a peaceful message. So I think that's the big distinction with our group, is that, so many people know that.
Okay, very good. Tyshawn, you got your hand up. You want to say something, sir?
Yeah, so just to add on top of that, I did have dialogue with those protesters at the very beginning, like when we first got there. And the thing that was so crazy to me is that I asked them if they knew who we were. They said yes. I asked them if they knew what our message was. They also said yes. And I asked them if they knew we weren't violent. They also said yes. So the thing was, it seems like they knew who we were, but they didn't care about that. And they just put every Black Lives Matter movement in one category, because as soon as people hear Black, they automatically are getting triggered. And that's the big thing with them, because they always preach, we're not against you guys, we're not against you guys, but they come out with us with guns. And like the big thing that is also very annoying is that no one's house, no one's car has been damaged throughout these protests in Eugene or Springfield or wherever. You know what I mean? That hasn't happened. It's only been like businesses. So like for the fact that they think that we're gonna come and hit their homes and their cars and all that stuff is ridiculous, because that's never even happened. So that's also super frustrating with that. And like for the distinction of groups, people know the people that go out and break stuff and the people that don't go out and break stuff. Those people cover their identities. People know Black Unity doesn't cover their identities. Like just that simple. We put our lives on the line every day that we do go out there and protest without covering our identities. And that's because we know that we're a peaceful group, and that we know, like the thing is, without that stuff happening, like I said earlier, with like the stuff getting broken and stuff like that, those people would never have came out of their homes. Like those people. And like the thing that's frustrating is that they come at us with guns and they come at us with mace and with machetes and stuff like that, knowing we're peaceful. But then there's people that go downtown and are actually breaking stuff, and they're nowhere to be seen around those people. They're not there to defend their town or whatever they say to us, like when the people are actually breaking stuff. But when it's a peaceful protest and they know they have the advantage to go mess with some people who aren't armed, that aren't actually trying to fight them, aren't actually trying to break things, they take advantage of that. And that's what's, and they know that. Those people know who Black Unity is, and they know what our message is. And at the end of the day, we're going to keep on trying to educate and keep on doing what we do. But those people know, and they need to be held accountable.
Thank you. Now, a comment was made, Martin mentioned going out and talking to the community, and I want to just make sure I have that in proper context. So community meaning those that march, or the actual community that you're going to go in, you're planning on going into? Because it sounds like you have some preliminary conversations with some people. And in those preliminary conversations, have you considered dialoguing with any police force where you go? In this particular case, SPD, is that door open to discuss how we can support your, how the march can be supported, or how we can safeguard everyone? And so, Tyson, I'll come back to you. I want to hear Morgan real quick. I'll come back to you, sir.
All right, so I think we need to make one thing absolutely clear here. We are a peaceful protest group. Our message is peaceful, and our actions are peaceful. The best way to be able to do that, and the best way to show that we can create a system of change, isn't by going through the police. It's by directly interacting with the community members that live in that community.
Okay.
And so when we're talking to these community members, on the one hand, we're talking to these community members who support us. We're talking to them, because they've lived in this environment. They've lived in this in the city. They know how their neighbors are going to react. And so we want to hear their opinion, and we appreciate the fact that they feel comfortable enough to tell us, how it is in that area. On the other hand, just like we talk to them, we also want to make sure that we're keeping a lookout for these counter protesters, keeping a lookout for this. And so one of the big things that sparked this protest was that video that surfaced of the individual putting up the skeleton on a noose. Because I think a lot of people don't realize that their subconscious actions can create bias. And it takes a lot of education. It takes a lot of re-examination to be able to understand that. And, that's why Black Unity was coming to do what we were going to do. But one of the things that we learned about this person was that, they were a war veteran. They have PTSD. They have things that, that are going on with them that can create a situation where when they're surrounded by a community of people, they might perceive that as being unsafe. And so we did try to reach out to this person. We tried to reach out and, explain to this person that, hey, we understand where you're coming from. And because, because the community members around you took the opportunity to tell that to us, we want to make absolutely clear that we're not going to come to your house. We're not going to come down your street. We're not going to make the focus on you, because the issue was never with that individual in the first place. It's the climate that enables individuals to create bias, to have that kind of bias. And that's really what we're trying to focus on. Within that community, within the Thurston community, it's not individuals, it is the environment itself that we're trying to change. Right. And that environment is what needs to be changed. And, in order to do that, the only way you can do that is to talk to the community. When it comes to any police force that is in existence right now, that receives money from the city, that receives money from the government, that's a part of this system, we're trying to change the system. We're trying to make sure that Black men and Black women aren't brutalized by the system. We're trying to make sure that that there's equity in the system. And in order to do that, we have to show how the system reacts when people challenge for peaceful change. And in order to do that, you can't communicate with the police. And that's, one of the core reasons why our message is ACAB. We understand that there are individuals, within the force that really want to create change, that really want to be out there and support the community. But we also understand that the system that they're in doesn't allow them to do that. And because the system that they're in doesn't allow them to do that, we will not communicate with the police. We will not, talk to them, because at the end of the day, it's our constitutional right to go out and peacefully protest. Very and good. That's what needs to be respected.
Very good. Thank you. Morgan, I know you want to say something. I'll come back to you, Tyshawn.
Another big reason we don't want to work with the police is because there's a lot of people within our community who have been victimized by the police, and we don't want to put them in a situation where they are fighting between standing up for what they believe in, but then also having to work with these people that have victimized them. And it's a situation that we don't want to put anyone in our community in a situation where they don't feel safe within one of our events. We want to make sure that people who are with us feel safe and feel a sense of loving community. And we've noticed when the cops have shown up, when we've asked them not to, when cops have showed up, and even when we said, please, we're fine, we understand what we're doing, we have people here to make sure people are safe, we have a security team to make sure people are being secure and people are safe, we have medics to make sure if people get injured, we have someone to take care of that, they still show up, and it causes people to get a bit scared, and it causes people to feel like their violence might happen. And we've noticed that when things have gotten violent at our events, it's because the police have been present. And it's happened more than once where situations where the police have shown up and things have gotten violent because the police have shown up. And we don't want anyone to feel that we're going to be working with a group that's going to cause them to be hurt. And I personally have not had many good experiences with police officers, and I definitely don't feel safe around police officers most of the time because of the way they've treated me personally and members of my family and friends. And I know there's other people in the community who feel the same way, and it makes them feel more comfortable knowing that we don't work with the police and we can still have these very safe, very successful, and educational events while working outside of the quote unquote lines.
Very good. Thank you. Tyshawn, you want to add something, sir?
Yeah, so just like off of like what Martin was saying, the one problem with working with the police is that, and also this is also another problem with just the police in general, is that they're humans at the end of the day. So like there's a group of people who are working to abolish them. Like mentally, you're not going to want to help those people. And that is something that you can't help being a human being. You're not going to want to help people that are working against you. And the problem with this is like, what happened in Thurston with these counter protesters is the police didn't do their job. And no matter if we're trying to abolish them or not, they still have a job to do, and that's to protect and serve. And that's a reason why we want to abolish them, because they're not doing that. They didn't protect the people that were unarmed, that weren't going there to break stuff, that weren't going there for confrontation. They were protecting the people that came there for confrontation, that came there with guns, that came there with pepper spray and mace, and came there to hurt people. That's the problem with the police, is they're not doing their job. And another thing about this is history truly does repeat itself. When has changes occurred? It's when people have been beaten, like Rodney King. It's like when Martin Luther King was murdered. It's with the sit-ins, when people were beaten. Like that's when change finally starts to happen. It's just like when I got dragged by the police, that's when people started to wake up in Springfield. That's when the mayor started to want to take action. And like that's a problem. That's why these things happen in the community. And another thing with the cops is like when they do show up, they don't do their job. Like it's just like when Isaiah got hit by a car, the police showed up and they didn't do anything. All they did was question us for 2 hours, not helping at all. We're the one that found out where the guy lived. We're the one that found his car. We're the one that found his apartment. Like we're the one that went and knocked on his door, made him come outside. The police didn't do anything. And that's majority of the time is the police aren't crime stoppers. They get there after the crime has already happened. And that's why we need to abolish them, because that system doesn't work and it doesn't help anybody. Like they are not they're not doing their job anymore because they're mad that people are trying to abolish them. And that's one thing that we can't help as humans. Like I said, like it's hard to be a policeman. Like that is hard, to have to protect and serve people who want to abolish you and get rid of you. Like that's hard. And that's the problem with being a police officer, is that like mentally there's a lot of things that as a human you really can't do. Like, and so that's the problem why we can't work with the police officers, because we know at the end of the day, no police officer is ever going to want to abolish the police. And that's our message. We want to abolish the police. So with that being said, that's why we can't work with them.
Good. And I have a sub question, but let me see. Can I add something you'd like to add?
Yeah, they practically said it all perfectly, to be honest. That's exactly how I was feeling. One thing that I wanted to add, though, is that if we ever do speak to the police, they have a completely different narrative when they're speaking to us versus speaking to counter protesters. So it's hard to trust somebody that can look us in the face and be like, yeah, all lives matter, including Black ones, and then they go across the line and they say, oh yeah, no, like, forget them, they don't matter, we got you guys, we don't have them. So when it comes to speaking to them, it kind of sounds counterproductive because of the fact that I feel like it's a whole lie. Like Tyshawn said, they're not for us, so there's no point of them to be nice to us, you know?
Okay, thank you. Martin, you want to add something really quick?
Yeah, and this will be my last comment. It actually bounces directly off of what Kanaya was saying. When our group didn't start off as ACAB, we didn't start off wanting to abolish the police. We actually started off with police reform. But that second protest in Thurston really opened our eyes to what was truly going on in the system. I mean, for some of us in the group, myself personally, I've never had good interactions with the police, despite being a good citizen. Despite doing that, I've only ever been harassed. So I've personally always been for police abolishment. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try and create dialogue with an officer to understand their mindset. And so in those first couple of protests in Thurston, where we were met with these barricades and their violence didn't actually occur, I did take the time to talk to one of these officers to understand his mindset, understand where he's coming from. And what he told me was, if it was just you and me, we could go into the precinct, we could pray, we can have this dialogue, and we can talk about the issues. But when I'm out here in the community and I'm looking at your group, I see criminals. I see people who are shouting ACAB, who are shouting fuck the police, who are shouting these things. And how can I work with somebody like that? So when an officer physically says that, and I don't know if that officer remembers that he said that, but when an officer says that, how can you work with the police at that point? How can you be about police reform when they're not even about it in their own hearts?
So give me a definition. What's the difference ideology-wise or philosophically between abolish the police and defund the police? What is the message behind each one of those terms? And what's the message and objective of Black unity? Is it abolish or is it defund, or are they the same thing or not?
So I can speak on that. So basically, this is the thing. So the big two differences is reform and abolish. Defund goes into because this process, like, we can't just be like, okay, let's abolish the police and get rid of all protection without any plans or anywhere to put this money. So it has to be defund first. So defund, put more money towards things like cahoots and also other organizations that are going to replace the police essentially. We have to come up with these systems and these plans on how we can replace the police and have security in our cities. So defunding the police goes hand in hand with abolishment. We have to defund them first, dismantle, and then eventually abolish them. So what will happen is that money will go to different organizations instead of the police having money for tear gas and having money for militarized weapons and tanks and such things like that. So that's what defund and abolish essentially means. So,
okay, Martin.
Yeah, and to bounce off of what Tyshawn is saying, there really is two aspects to to abolishment with the defund and with abolishing. When it comes to defunding and when it comes to that reallocation of funds in the community, one of the things that I think Eugene and Oregon has kind of recognized and is kind of ahead of the game when we compare to the rest of the country is that mental health is important. Your mental state is important. Your health care is important. And so a lot of what Oregon has been doing over the past, 10 to 15 years is really trying to find a way to create space to put more funding into these solutions, put more funding into these preventative measures to stop an individual from, getting into a space where they feel like the only way to survive is to commit a crime, or getting to a space where they feel like the only action they can take to get reconciliation is to hurt somebody. And so Oregon is really putting a lot of effort into that. You can see that in here in Eugene through Looking Glass, Kids First, sponsors, all of these different community organizations that have kind of popped up in addition to Cahoots. When it comes to that abolishment piece, one thing that I think people aren't understanding is that the system that gives police the power to do what they do is legislative. It's written into law.
Mm-hmm.
Just like what happened in Thurston that third night. When the police set up a barricade, this is actually this is in city code, and this is in Oregon law. When police set up a barricade and they declare something unlawful, they're required by law to use force if people don't disperse. That's actually a requirement, and so that gives them that power to go in and to be a little bit more rough and to be shielded behind that system of protection. Whereas if a civilian did that, we know that they'd be behind bars. We know that they'd have restitution. We know that they need to go into these programs to ensure that they don't go back into criminal recidivism, so that they don't end up back into the system. But that's not the same, in the police force. That's not the same in their environment. And so that abolishment piece means that we have to tear that entire system down in order to build it up to make it a better system, in order to make sure that these mental health facilities that have been popping up are included in legislation as well, in order to make sure that everything that Oregon's been doing to create these preventative stopgaps are in that system as well. Because right now, when you're looking at police reform, and police reform has been something that people have tried for hundreds of years, you can only ever chip away at the system piece by piece. People still die. People still are incarcerated for life. People are still stuck in the system. Mm-hmm. It took all the way to this year for Oregon to finally put into legislation and vote into act the law that makes it what am I trying to say? That makes it impossible for a jury to convict somebody with a mixed trial. If it's not a unanimous decision, we know that person is not going to be incarcerated anymore, and that's a good thing. But that should have already been in place. We shouldn't have had to wait 100 additional years for that to happen. And that's where that abolishment piece comes from. It creates an opportunity for us to create these changes in a more quick environment, to build up a new protection system in a quicker environment rather than chip away at the system piece by piece by piece.
Well, that's very helpful, very, very useful regard the information and philosophically. I met you and Kanaya last weekend, and I told several people that I was very impressed with the both of you. I found you both to be very articulate, intelligent, well-spoken. You had a sense of mission and purpose about who you are and what you're doing, and with your intentions regarding Black unity. And so hearing this explanation regarding defunding and then abolishment, we're talking about the complete cultural infrastructure, if you will, of how the oppression of the system, the setup of the oppression of the system. So in the chants, right, there's a lot of comments on here in the questions that all of you have. In the chants, ACAB, all cops are bastards, fuck the police, all those. What I'm listening to you, and I'm catching this. What you're saying is to the system itself, how it is set up. That's what you're chanting about. Is that a correct assumption? Okay, very good. All right, I'd like to move on a little bit. That was really enlightening, and I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of people who are going to be listening to this are going to hear these distinctions and come to a better place of, okay, now we know what is on their heart and their mind and what they're really trying to communicate. Let me move on to another question. What are your thoughts about city leadership acknowledging and assuming their personal role and responsibility for dismantling the institutional racism that exists in the light of the protest occurring in Springfield? Morgan, I'll start with you. You're on my left. You're the first person I see, and then I'll just go down the line.
There's I don't know, there's not a lot of leaders that I've gotten to speak with personally. Martin's gotten to speak with many more leaders than I have, just because of my work schedule and stuff like that. But from the leaders that I've gotten to meet with, which have been very few because there haven't been as many leaders as I would have hoped coming forward to try and really work with us and try to help understand what we're really trying to do. And it has been very difficult and very frustrating for me personally, because it seems like we just go in circles a lot of the times. And we have meetings we go to these council meetings and we see people fall asleep during council meetings, which is very frustrating. It happened, and it's just like, why are you even wanting to be a council person if you're not going to actually do your job and represent the people from your district and work to actually prop up the community and help the people in your ward, or I don't know, I don't know what they're called there. I just moved here, but with the area that that your district, to actually feel safe and hear their voices, because I've talked to many other people who say that they talk to their representative and they don't ever feel like they're ever really heard. And so as Black Unity, we're really trying to help bridge that gap and try and make sure that the community voice is actually being heard, and we can actually get things done to actually that are really plaguing certain districts across the not in just in Springfield, but also Eugene and Thurston and all the areas surrounding the area.
Very good. Now, Kanaya, have you had the opportunity to speak with any of the leadership in Springfield and address some of the issues that are important to you?
I personally have not. Yeah, I haven't talked to anyone in Springfield, Eugene, though.
If you could have a conversation with any of them, what are a couple of things questions you'd like to ask, or issues you'd like to bring up?
If I was to speak to anybody at Springfield, especially someone that holds any power, I'd want to know how they've gone so long without protecting people of color. That's one thing that I think it's crazy that we all thought about it, and it's taken this long for people to wake up and see that Thurston and Springfield has been so blatantly racist. It's not comfortable for kids growing up there. I played basketball. I would go have games there. It would just be a casualty thing. Like, just casually people would say the N-word. They would say things about Mexican people. It's disgusting. So I want to know, why is it now that Black people are speaking up that you want to listen to us? Why couldn't you have done that and seen that through your own eyes? Like, I'm just confused on what's taken so long, and how do they expect to help us now? You know, what do they expect to do to keep us safe? Because I don't even want to drive in Springfield anymore. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to cancel every appointment that I have in Springfield because it feels like a danger zone, and that's not okay. So I would ask them, what are they going to do for us?
Thank you. Tyshawn?
So, like, basically off of what Kanaya is saying, the big thing to ask them for sure is, why is it when people are actually starting to physically get hurt is when they want to step up? And that's the problem, is history really does repeat itself. Like I said earlier, like, no changes actually start getting made until the whole nation is outraged about the things that are happening. And it took George Floyd to be killed for that to happen. And that's, George Floyd wasn't the first George Floyd, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not like this stuff hasn't been happening. And the thing that I think is what's happening in Springfield, Thurston area is that it's finally starting to affect them. That's the thing. People don't make any moves until it starts to affect them. Their lives were regular. There was no one protesting in Springfield. There was no one protesting in Thurston. You know, they got to get up and get their coffee every day like they do and go to work and come back home, and their lives have never been affected by this. You know what I mean? Because they're not Black. They don't have to go through these struggles that we have to go through daily. And now that we came there and told them, hey, this is real, this happens everywhere, that's a problem that you guys aren't realizing that. Now people are starting to wake up, and now the mayor's starting to realize that, oh, this is happening in my town too. I thought this was just happening in Eugene, or maybe this was just happening in Minnesota. Like, this is an international movement, and everywhere needs to understand that, and Springfield needs to understand that we're coming there because those are the people that are not understanding us the most. And like those people need to be educated the most. They need to hear our message more than anybody because they're living in this bubble that they think racism doesn't exist. They think Black people aren't being oppressed. They think white privilege is not real. And that goes for the mayor as well. And that goes for the city council as well. They think that this stuff doesn't exist because it doesn't affect them. And now Black Lives Matter being so big internationally, it's a touchy subject. Now you have to do something. Now, if you don't do something, you will be canceled. And so now it's like, it's annoying that we have to do it this way, but at least it's getting done in my eyes.
Very good. Kanaya?
So also one question that I want to ask. So I just expressed to you guys that I'm scared to go in Springfield as a Eugenian, as somebody that lives and resides in Eugene. What are you going to do for the BIPOC people that live in Springfield, Thurston area that want to move out of their homes? They have people driving past their homes slowly. They have people harassing them. They hear the conversations from their backyard about how they wish that these protesters would die. And how do you expect to protect those people, and where do you send them when the police is working with the same folks that aren't protecting us? Like, how do you choose to deal with that?
Thank you. Martin?
So real quick, before I answer and add on to what my colleagues are saying, I would like you to ask your question one more time, because I feel like there's multiple aspects of that question that I need to address, and I just want to make sure that I heard everything that you asked correctly.
Well, initially it started with Kanaya regarding if you had a chance to speak with city leadership, the mayor, city council, what would you say to them? What would be your message? What do you want them to hear from you?
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the things that these counselors who were voted into office, these folks who live up in this area don't really realize is that while we can say Springfield and Eugene are two different places, those the two cities are very interconnected. We have to travel to Springfield for certain things, just like Springfield citizens need to travel to Eugene for certain things. And on top of that, one of the things that a lot of folks who are growing up here now don't really realize is that Oregon itself was a state that was built with the intent to be a white utopia. And so, knowing the history and understanding that, in 60s and the 70s and the, early 80s, even parts of the 90s, this town was it was a sunset town. If you were a person of color, specifically if you were a Black person, you weren't allowed to live in this town. You weren't, at sundown, you had to leave. This was in Eugene, and it was definitely in Springfield. Now, although legislation has passed to outlaw, sunset towns, the people are still alive. It's not like an entire generation was skipped. These are the people who have become these city leaders. These are the people who have become, people in these prominent positions in Springfield, in Eugene. And so, when we're focused specifically on the Springfield lens and, on meeting these leaders, before I can have a discussion with them about what needs to change, in this community to help these people of color and to help Black lives in this Black Lives Matter movement, I have to ask them, can you reflect on yourself, and can you ask yourself, for the past 20, 30 years that progressiveness has existed in Oregon, have I been a progressive? Have I been a champion for change? Have I been somebody who wants to listen to these voices? Because in Eugene, we've had the opportunity to meet with a lot of the city leaders. We had a lot of opportunity to meet with a lot of these officials, and they've had that internal struggle. They've had that debate with themselves, so they're able to come with us unbiased, with open eyes and open hearts, to be able to attack this issue. But there's still councilmen and councilwomen who are on the council who refuse to have that internal dialogue with themselves, knowing that there's still one or two of them in Eugene. And like I said, these two communities are interconnected. You go over to Springfield, where everybody in Eugene says, don't go to Springfield, don't go to Springfield, don't go to Springfield. Rather than having two counselors on the community, in these positions of power who do this, you have 7 counselors in a position of power who haven't had this internal debate of themselves. You have a mayor who hasn't had this internal debate to understand themselves. You have an entire police force that hasn't had this conversation. So before we can have that chance to talk to them, they need to look in the mirror and they have to talk to themselves.
Thank you. Morgan, you had some comments, sir? You're on mute. Unmute yourself.
Martin hit it right on the head. I don't need to say anything else.
Okay, very good. I want to read a observation. This is on page 3 of the questions that you sent at the very top. It says, from one of the residents of the city, I was expecting after this for the visit to the mayor's house to be really dangerous. But I heard their message and their request, and I thought, those are very reasonable, and I would fully support all of them. But when I hear cops are bastards, read graffiti that cops should die, protesters saying cops should be raped, it sends a different message. And I don't want to address that. I want you guys to address the passion of what's going on and maybe some of that conflict and how to straighten some of that out, because there is that sense of confusion that comes when tensions are high. And I'm listening to all of you, and I think there's a very reasonable explanations and answers that you can give to maybe ease some of those conflicts. So, Martin, I'll start with you.
So I think one thing needs to be said before we even have this conversation is that although there are, there may have been people who are saying, these, police officers need to be raped, this, X, Y, and Z, everybody's human. And Black Unity as an organization does not condone any individual, anyone saying that somebody needs to be raped, anyone saying that these people need to have violence inflicted on them. We do not condone that. We are a peaceful protest, and although that although that may have happened at the event after the police, the police and the Proud Boys, brutalized us, something that I think the community needs to realize is that everyone comes from a different part of this community. There are some people who come down from Portland, who Portland has a different atmosphere from Eugene. There are some folks who come from Coos Bay. Coos Bay has a different atmosphere from Eugene. Eugene has a different atmosphere from Springfield, and it's like knowing all of these things and knowing where everyone's coming from. I think one of the things that the community members need to realize is that on top of us, wanting to bridge things together and be a part of this larger movement, people are also bringing in their personal experiences. There have been members in this community who have been raped by police officers and who want, who passionately want them to understand, what that comes from. And, their mental health has taken a toll from, what has happened due to this. And, knowing that their mental health has taken a toll, the only thing that they can really help to say is, I hope you get raped. And like I said, while Black Unity does not condone that, or we don't condone any, any form of violence, any kind of threat or anything like that towards officers, they have to understand that when you've done this to the community, when you've done this to individuals, and you put them in a corner, you put them in a place where they're not allowed to express themselves, where they're not allowed to, heal and really, move on from what had happened, that's the only way they're going to respond. It's a cycle.
Okay, thank you. Kanaya, you want to say something, ma'am?
I'm agreeing with him. I'm like, he said it perfectly. It's like after people have been so hurt, especially a woman was the one to say that, right? So when you see a male, apparently that night in Springfield too, a male officer frisked a woman a little too much. And that is a common thing for us. So we're Black for one, and for two, we're women. So that's two things that is already like oppressing us. So when people say stuff like that, to be honest, it sucks to hear, but it's the reality of life. It's like, I wish that this would happen to you, even though that's not how I personally and BU personally deals with things. I'm not mad at her, to be honest.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Morgan? Unmute yourself.
It's a natural reaction to having all this pent up energy over time, and the police departments in both Eugene and Springfield haven't done anything to address the problems within either of those two organizations, and so we give a lot of people have just had to sit there and fester and watch as these people don't even get punished. They just go along living their days like they haven't done anything wrong. And it's really, for a lot of people, especially when you have mental health issues, it feels like a spit in the face when you are, or you're just victimized. And not only are you victimized because of your skin color or your sexual orientation, but then also, you know, on top of that, you also have mental health problems. And so then it also compounds. And over time, it's all you can say to a point is you yell out what you can only hope is to get someone to listen. And when I see those things and I hear those things, it makes me sad, because I know that someone's not saying that out of like pure anger. They're saying that more out of pain than anything. When those words are spray painted or really are said when our protests, it's because those words are coming from pain and not anger. It's because these people have been brutalized, victimized, and sexualized to a point where that's all they have to say, because they're so entrenched in this pain that's been forced upon them. And it's really sad that this is a product that has been pushed out by EPD and SPD.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Martin. You want to add something real quick? Martin?
So I wanted to also address the rest of the question, because, you know, that was one aspect of the question that you asked. The rest of the question kind of, you know, is a focus on, you know, when we're saying ACAB, when we're saying F the police, when we're saying that. Like I said, we're in educational protest. In order to understand our message, the only way you can really do that is to come out and actually listen to the educational portions of our protest. And so when we're saying those things, it's a deliberate tactic. It's a tactic to make people come out of their homes, because just like what you said, you know, with this person who asked this question, you know, it makes them start to think, it makes them wonder what's going on. And the best way to understand what's going on and why people are saying these things is to come out, you know, when we're paused on one of those street stops, when we're stopping in an area, when we have, you know, one of our leaders speaking, or a member from the community speaking. Because when we have those speaking portions of the protest, that's when we're explaining why. But the residents don't really come to the speaking portions of that protest. You know, they hear the F police, they hear that, and they record all of that. But, you know, their counter protesters, the people who they feel comfortable following at these events, like to, you know, turn their cameras off when the educational piece is happening, when the why happens. And so you can't have the what without the why. And that's really, you know, where we're at.
Well, very good. And I just wanted to share with all of you as the leaders of the Black Unity that there are people who are observing you and saying it is very reasonable. They have reasonable requests. We want to support that request and want to support them. And then you're giving great explanations regarding the duality of the presentation of the intellectual component and the emotional pain component of it all. So I want to ask one more question about protests, and then I want to move on to other things, because there's really, really great questions on here. But this one has came up significantly or multiple times, and I want people to hear from you. This is your story to tell, not anyone else's. Does Black Unity believe that protests are peaceful when young children, the elderly, the mentally unstable, families, neighborhoods, and businesses are subject to late-night screaming protesters shouting untruths and profanities like ACOB and the other things we've mentioned? What is the exact purpose of these protest tactics? And do you understand that they serve to incite and escalate anger and violence among your supporters and further alienate many other who would otherwise agree with the need for racial reform and justice, or now just simply turned off? Okay, Kanaya, and then I'll come to you, Taisha.
Okay, so I want to address this really quick. So one thing that people have been saying, you know, is that they have their kids are sleeping. It's loud, it's noisy, it's obnoxious. One thing that they don't understand is we cannot sleep. Like, the thing is, it doesn't stop. At the end of the night, it doesn't stop for us. It's not something you can just turn off. We have dreams about this stuff. We wake up, we go outside, we're Black wherever we go. Wherever we go, we're Black. So going out in the street at night, when that's a really peaceful time, and saying, hey, I can't breathe, I can't sleep. It's not over yet. It still keeps people involved and engaged, and that's what they need to be doing right now. They need to be just as startled and upset as we are, because that's the only way to make a change is don't be silent, get loud. get loud all the time. Until we have justice, we need to be loud. So that's my piece.
Thank you. Tyshawn, thank you.
So for me, like, us being out there, like, I just feel like your sleep is not more important than Black Lives Mattering. Like, just off the rip. And like, if us saying these things, like, is the reason that there's room for these conversations to happen, because otherwise, like, this is the thing about the protests. Protesting, we know, is not going to make the actual policy changes and stuff like that. But what it does is it shows people what we're out there for, and it keeps pressure on, like, the media and the police and the city council and the government, like, and everyone. It keeps pressure on everyone. The whole world is protesting. It's keeping pressure on everyone. And so the point of protesting is to for people that otherwise wouldn't go on a website and look up why we're mad, or look up our demands and look at stuff. That's the point of a protest. So the protest, us being out there and yelling and chanting and knocking our pants together and everything, it's to get you to come outside and listen to what we have to say, because otherwise you would be in your house going about your regular life and just making it seem like nothing is happening. But us going and making this noise, it's not about disrupting your kid being asleep, or your these older people and stuff like that. It's about to get you to come outside your house and figure out why we're so upset and figure out why we're so mad, because we're past the point. We're past the point. Like, at the beginning of this movement, it was just like Black people coming and speaking on why they were angry, like what their stories and what's happened to them and stuff like that. And now we're past that point. You know what I mean? We've been protesting for like 70 days now. We're at the point to where it's time to start teaching people why we're upset, and teaching people why Black lives should matter, and teaching people why you need to abolish the cops, and teaching people why these systems are put in place to oppress people of color. Like, it's time to start teaching people that. People are past the point to where they want to come outside and listen to like Black people yell and scream about why they're mad, because people understand we're mad now. They know we're mad. Like, you know what I'm saying? Minnesota got burned down. Like, LA, like people know that we're mad. Now it's time to start telling these people why we're mad and how they can fix it and how they can help and how they can help change these systems. So that's what the protests. If we stop the protests, then it stops the pressure, and it people aren't as involved because it's not directly affecting their lives.
Very good. Thank you. Very detailed answer. Morgan?
I think it's also very important for those people who are asking these questions to also ask themselves, would you be having a conversation with your children about social injustice and trying to let them know about what's going on in this country if we weren't having these protests in your neighborhood? Because I've had conversations and listened to conversations with white people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, asking them, having conversations about when they should talk to their children about social injustice situations. And for a lot of my personal friends who are white, they hear about these conversations way too late in their life, and they feel bad for not understanding what we've been going through since birth. And for a lot of these parents, it should be a blessing to them. It's an eye-opening situation where now they have a ability to have an open dialogue with their children and actually talk about these situations, and able to bring their children out of their house and into the street to come and to march with us and learn from us and get educated. And we've had several situations. I think every time we have a protest, we have at least 5 people come out of their house and into the street to join us and march with us and learn with us, which is one of the greatest things I think about Black unity as a group, is that we actually can physically be able to get people out of their house and into the street to come and learn from us, because when you see our protests and you watch us come by, it's nothing but people, a community of people who are smiling and happy to be there and happy to be fighting for what they believe in, and are truly 100% with all good intention want to help change the community and are trying to fight for a better place.
Thank you. Martin?
Well, first off, I think Ty, Kanaya, and Morgan hit everything that I want to say about the protest specifically on the head. You know, beautiful job, y'all. Now, I think the thing that I want to address is the actual question itself. You know, when me working in mental health, and me kind of, having a deeper understanding of, the question behind the question, or the intent behind the question. You know, when I look at a question like this, and I read how they're stating things, like, for example, what is the exact purpose of this of these protest tactics? Do you understand that they serve to incite and escalate anger and violence among your supporters and further alienate from many who would otherwise agree with the need? A statement like that, what that person is really saying is that, or what that person really means is that I'm in a bubble, and do you feel like you can come in and disrupt this bubble, because within this bubble, everything that I said in this question is true. My, where I live, there are mentally unstable, there's elderly, there are businesses, there are businesses that are there, but because the people of color in this community are oppressed, and that that part's not being said, but we have to understand that that's an important aspect, because they've already been silenced, and because these individuals aren't the ones being approached by the police in a negative mindset, being approached by the judiciary system in a negative mindset, they have the ability to say that, for me, everything you're saying is untrue, because I'm not a person of color, because I'm not a person, I'm not a person who's being oppressed by the system. So I don't really understand. One of the things that I think was really beautiful, and this didn't happen, within the Black Lives Matter movement itself. This actually happened when I first started working in mental health, and I was working at an addiction and treatment center. And one of the staff members was asked to teach options to anger, which is, a way to help kids kind of understand the anger cycle and understand how to jump in and intervene in that cycle. One of the things that she said point blank to these youth after a couple of months was that, hey, how can I help y'all? Because I've never been angry. I've never had something to be angry about. So when I'm teaching this course, I don't know how to connect with you in that way to understand where your anger is coming from. So how do I help you? She was able to really analyze that question, really analyze the options to anger course, and know that her bubble, her purview didn't include that. And the person who asked that question, the person who asked this question, I think they have to ask that themselves too. They have to say, does my bubble actually allow these things to be visualized in this community, to be shown, so that I have an understanding of where this dialogue is coming from. And the fact that that bubble exists is the very reason why we need these protests to come out there, because that's the only way they can be educated.
Very good. I want to pivot to some of the different kinds of questions now. Thank you all for your detailed, thoughtful answers. Those are very useful. So my next question is, the next question on the that have come in is, what are Black Unity's priorities for action, and how can community-based organizations support those priorities? How can individuals support those priorities? Who would like to go first? Okay, Martin.
So first and foremost, one of the big things that we realize here in Oregon is that there aren't a lot of Black people, there aren't a lot of people of color in this community. And to be quite honest, there isn't anything there isn't anything about this area that makes it friendly for, or makes it an opportunity for a person of color to come into this environment. So like when we look at the big revenue generators of the community, like the University of Oregon, like Portland, PSU, Peace Health, those big organizations and things like that, you know they create opportunity for people of color to come in and to really educate themselves, to really grow and make a difference. But when you look at the greater community, and when you look at the greater community of Oregon, and you step out of those isolated bubbles, and you see what it's actually like in this community, you realize that, why would I, take all of this knowledge that I'm building, take all of these resources, take everything that I've learned, from these helpful institutions, and share it to people that don't want to change. And so when you understand that, it comes to no surprise that all the people of color, when they get their degree, or when they, get what they came here to get, they leave and go back to the communities that want to be able to change, that want to have this difference. So one of the first priorities of action that we want to do is we want to make sure that this community is receptive to this message and is receptive to people of color. The only way that you can really do that at this time is to create multicultural centers where people feel like they can connect with these people, where people feel like they can build a community, where people feel like they can, where people feel like if they want to learn how to run a business and they want to be a Black-owned business, a Black-run business owner, they have this network of support that they can come up to talk to. And I think individuals who want to support these priorities, the best way that they can, the best way that they can support those priorities is by talking to the people of color in their, talking to those individuals within their community and asking them, hey, how can I support, you bringing your extended family up here? What are some of the things that they want to see, in this community so that they can call it home? To create a truly diverse environment here in Oregon where we can have that dialogue, where we can have equitable change. As a as community-based organizations and as city officials, what systems can we put in place to foster relationships? What systems can we put in place to do that? If we look down, in the communities of color in LA, in Riverside, down in California, where I'm from, they've already established these centers. They've already established these, multicultural centers, and they've already started to build that equitable change that needs to happen down there. And what's happened as a result is, they become these, havens of multicultural diversity, havens of, multiracial leadership, and havens of true, just true change.
Very good. Another question here says, as a Springfield resident, I would like to know if there are specific actions our city can take to improve quality of life for our Black African-American neighbors, specific issues Black Unity wants to raise with the Springfield City Council leadership. Kanaya, would you like to start?
I'm gonna let Morgan start. He has something to say.
Morgan.
I think a big thing that they could do is create places like community centers that are safe places for people of color. Because as anyone in the area knows, there aren't a lot of community centers in general, but especially not places that cater towards people of color, places that actually have special places for children of Muslim faith to actually be able to do their prayers, because as someone who worked at the African American Cultural Center at the University of Arizona, that was a problem that we had, is we didn't have a safe place for Muslim students to actually come and be able to pray, because they have such strict prayer rituals. And situations like that actually foster and let people of color know that their culture is accepted, and not only accepted, but also offered opportunities to flourish and thrive in the Springfield area. Because I know there's a lot of people of color who live in the Springfield area and don't feel comfortable proudly showing off their heritage or proudly showing off their culture, because they know they'll be subject for harassment or possibly having people threaten them in different situations. And it's very frustrating for me personally, as someone who lived in the Thurston area for the first 5 years of my life, kind of understanding what it's like to be in a situation like that, seeing how my father dressed in certain situations, be going to certain areas of Springfield just based on what area it was. And so if we can build a place like a cultural center where we can have people of color can come and openly and proudly be their true selves and tout their heritage, I think that'd be a great big step forward for the city of Springfield and many of the leaders to actually build a relationship with the people of color in that area.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. You want to say something?
Yeah, okay, so I think the biggest part is it starts with a smile, honestly. I think it starts with, you see a person of color, so many times we wear our Black Lives Matter mask, we go out there and people see us and they give us this nasty look, like they smell something really gross every time. It doesn't matter if they know you. It starts with a smile. I feel like the next thing is educate. So educate your kids, educate your friends' kids, educate your cousins, educate all of the youth, because right now the only thing that's going to make a change is if we make sure that we're not raising racist children. We cannot raise racist children. And so if it starts with, oh, you see someone mistreating a person of color, you go up and you go and educate them. That's not how you treat somebody. That's not the way to deal with anybody, especially right now. They're really oppressed. They might be scared to be here. They're going through a lot. And check your friends, check your family, and make sure that they know that that's not appropriate. Also, make sure that the teachers that are in Thurston High School, in Springfield High School, and all of the elementary schools aren't letting kids say the N-word, aren't letting people call somebody out of their name because they're a person of color. Make sure that they are on that and correcting that and punishing that, and make sure that it's not just a little thing that happens casually, because that's exactly why we're enabling racist people in this state, is because no one is calling them out. No authority figure is calling them out, and they're sitting there getting praised for it by their friends. So.
All right, thank you. Very good. Tyson, Tashawn, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
That's literally what I was going to bring up. What Kanai was talking about. Like, I'm really big on education. And one thing that has to start is normalizing the teaching of like Black history. Like, honestly, if it was up to me, I think that these history textbooks need to be burned, and because they are very outdated and they don't teach the right side of history. One thing that needs to be normalized is, like she said, holding kids accountable for speaking to these kids and speaking to children in a way that is respectable. So like kids calling like other kids of color like the N-word, or just saying it to other white people, and they normalize it like it's just the normal thing to do. These kids aren't getting in trouble. That needs to be fixed. That needs to be start with the teachers being held accountable, not letting this happen. The principals not letting this happen, and normalizing Black culture, normalizing other culture for people of color. Like, that needs to be normalized, because a lot of these kids they grow up in a household where they're not taught their culture very often, and they don't feel comfortable with this culture at school. So it starts with like these after school programs, as well as like these community centers, but also in school, feeling like it's okay for you to wear your hair natural, but like it's okay for you to come to school dressed in your culture, like how you dress. You know what I mean? Feeling like it's okay for those things, normalizing those things, because a lot of kids, for lack of better words, that are Black act white in those places, because that's all they know, that's all they've been taught. You know what I mean? So having a safe space for these kids to be able to go where they know their culture is going to be is going to thrive at. They know they're going to learn things about themselves, about their body, about, you know what I mean? Just like normalizing that, like especially in the schools, like having more Black sports coaches, more Black teachers. Like, these things have to be normalized in these places, because it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, and that's what's going to create the changes, being uncomfortable. You're never going to make any change if you're always comfortable. And it's super hard. It's really hard. Like, I work with kids a lot. Like, I'm in the BSU, and I've got to talk with a lot of these kids at these summits, and they just feel like they have nowhere to turn. You know what I mean? Their parents were raised here, so their parents are the exact same way that they're growing up. So they don't know any better. They don't know how to help them. And so it's just this problem with this education system that is teaching these kids that it's okay to be racist. It's okay to spew microaggressions at your friends, and it's not these kids' fault. It's the teachers, it's the parents, and it's may not be their fault either, because maybe they don't know as well. Like that's literally the main problem. Is like one thing that Black Unity is working towards, and one thing that we hope to accomplish, is being able to work in these schools and start like these after school programs and stuff, where we can start educating the teachers as well as the students, because it starts with them as well, teaching these kids. Because this has been happening here for way too long, is people not being comfortable in their culture, because they feel like there's only one culture here, and if they don't represent that culture, they will have no friends, they'll be outcasted. So yeah.
I'd like to okay, real quick, Martin.
So I'll just address the last part, because I think that everybody hit everything, the nail on the head with everything that they just said on education and whatnot. The last big piece that we need to address within the community is that equity piece. And I think, another thing that we have to bring in, and I'll only speak on this briefly because I believe there's a question specifically about it, the medical piece, and that higher education piece as well, because when we're looking to this community, and we're hearing that these individuals have no one to turn to help them express themselves, to help them understand who they are, where they come from, their social identity. The fact of the matter is that in both Eugene and Springfield, the people that these folks have to turn to in these positions of power to understand what they can do to get ahead are allies. No, not even allies. They're white people. Like even when a person of color is elected, we saw this with President Obama, and we see this with the local elected officials in our community as well. Even when we are, placed in these positions of power, we're seen as a token of like, oh, this person's been placed here. Y'all are good. You got to where you needed to go. This thing is done, so we can move on with our lives and we can continue doing what we're doing. But the reality is, we don't want to have to turn, when we're looking at a position of power and we're looking to really seek that mentorship, we shouldn't have to turn to an ally. We shouldn't have to turn to a white person to get that. We should be able to turn to, like the founding families in Eugene, like the Mims family, like the Washingtons, like the Reynolds families. We should be able to turn to them because they hold these positions of power, because they've been in these communities just as long as the white folks who have been in this community as well. There needs to be an equity on both levels.
Okay. So let me ask a different question. I'd like to hear from each one of you. Why is it? I want you to, in your own words, I want you to make a statement to any elected official or any community member, any community resident. Why is it they don't have to be afraid of you and with the work that you're doing? Morgan or Taishan, your hand is up. I'll start with you.
One reason they don't have to be afraid of us, especially these city's officials, is because we are open to having dialogue with these officials, and we prove that. And we've also have proved time and time again that Black unity is about the peaceful protests, and there's evidence to back that up. And we have a list of demands, we have a mission statement to show what we are about. And if you don't know what we are about at this point, then that's just because you're not listening. And that's the very problem with this, is people not listening to our message. And so like, if you're afraid of us, it's because you're just watching the news on what's happening in these other places, and you're only paying attention when stuff is getting broken. You're not paying attention to the messages that we're actually trying to speak, that are peaceful and that are about actual change and realistic goals to set for this community. So if you're only paying attention to when the bad stuff is happening, then that just means you're just not here for actual change. You're only here when you feel like things are going bad.
And is that the same message you would give to the residents and or neighborhoods that you enter into?
Yeah, 100%. Like, people only come out when they feel like it's bad stuff about to happen, or something's about to get broken. And that's like the major issue. Come out when we're being educational. Come out when we're trying to teach you something. Come out when we're trying to educate you and talk to you and have actual dialogue. That's why we have these open forums, because we don't believe in canceling anybody who doesn't believe in the same stuff we believe in. We believe in educating those people and telling them, here's why we disagree with you. And at the end of the day, if we agree to disagree, at least they heard us and they can understand now where we're coming from, or maybe they don't. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, they heard our message and they understand that we're not violent and we're not coming there to break down your town. So if you still believe that, that's because you are choosing to believe that.
Thank you. Thank you. Kanaya?
So I think he hit it on the mark. I think one way to not be afraid of us is to actually go to a protest, attend, actually bring your body, bring your friends, bring your family, go out there. And if it is peaceful, if you're enjoying it, then you can go tell other people that we're not people to be afraid of. And I'm a little thrown off that anyone would be afraid of us. It seems kind of racist to think like, why would they be afraid of us? Like, that question just kind of set me off. Like, afraid? A bunch of Black people out there saying, treat me right, I want to be equal to you, should not trigger anybody to be afraid of us. It should be like, dang, there's something wrong and we should help. Like, it shouldn't be fear. So turn that fear into interest, and turn that interest into something that you can use to help others. You have a voice. So I know I'm getting a little off topic, but I just feel like we've expressed ourselves so many times and said that we're peaceful and told everyone to come join us. We tell you to get off your phones, get out of your house, come join us, and they'll realize once they actually do that we're peaceful people.
Just so you know, all of you know, that question is my question, because when I got out of the Army in 1995 and I came to this community, people were afraid of me. And so I wanted you to say in your own words why people don't have to be afraid of you. Martin?
So, I think it's really helpful that you just said that, because I was actually going to address two topics on this, because there's a group of people that should be afraid and there's a group of people that shouldn't be afraid. The group of people that shouldn't be afraid are these counselors, are, the general population, the members of the community. Because at the end of the day, I'll say this, and I can say this to anyone, point blank. Racism has been politicized. Black lives have been politicized. This entire movement has been politicized. It's become a political issue when the reality is that focus needs to be shifted from political to a humanitarian issue. Why are humans being treated differently from one another? Why are humans being treated why is this group of humans being treated one way while this group of humans is treated the other way? And as a counselor, as a person in that position of, as an elected official in that position of power, you should feel honored to be able to be a part of that discussion, to, be able to better your community, to be able to better the people's lives in your community. So, this is it's humanitarian. And, just like you said, when you came here in 1995, people were afraid of you. There is a group of people that does need to be afraid. And that's the group of people who hold the money, who are, that group of people who are so stuck in their old ways that they cannot see us as anything other than less than human, that cannot see us, from anything less than 3/5, because those are the people who are creating the legislation to allow this to happen. Those are the people who are funding the legislation to allow, to create that opportunity. And when push comes to shove, when lawsuits are done, and when, when this humanitarian movement can finally come to a place where everyone's treated as humans, somebody is going to have to pay. Somebody is going to be held accountable. Back in the 2008 economic crisis, the people who created that situation were not held accountable. But here in this humanitarian movement, just like they did, in Germany, when they finally created this the memorial for the Jews to, honor, what had happened in this, the struggles that they faced, the genocide that they were a part of. The same thing's going to happen to, the folks that are, the Black lives and the folks in the BIPOC community who have experienced this as well. And when it comes time for somebody to pay, when it comes time for somebody to, own up and say, I was wrong on this, that's going to come from those people of power who have perpetuated the system. And it's not necessarily the city councilors. It's the people who have that financial burden.
Thank you. Thank you. Morgan?
As someone who was born in the area, I'm from here. I don't want to destroy everything around me. I mean, my grandparents live out here. I grew up around here. I have no animosity towards Springfield and the regular citizens. But Martin is correct. The people with the money should be afraid because we believe that we should be treated equally. And right now, the money is not distributed equally amongst people of color. And that's one of the big things we are pushing for as Black Unity, is to try and make sure that people of color get that equal piece of the pie. And it's because we see this country and we see these people who come to our protest and wave these flags in our face and say these represents my rights, these represents my freedom. And all we're trying to do with our movement is just say, hey, I'm trying to manifest my own destiny. And if I remember correctly, that's very important to the founding of America, was being able to manifest your own destiny. And I even told my grandfather about this, and he thinks it's ridiculous when the Proud Boys come and wave a flag in our face and say what they're doing is okay because they have an American flag and they're representing their right to be free. And my grandpa was like, shoot, you're an American. Why don't you bring an American flag? You're an American too. And so just like one thing I would want to make sure everyone understands is we're all Americans. We want to live in a big, happy America as well. But unfortunately, because of the way things have been politicized and the way that the system has been created in this country, a lot of Americans have these rose-colored glasses that give them the illusion that it is truly a equal opportunity for everyone in America, and unfortunately, it's truly not. And unfortunately, we have to pull the wool back from some people's eyes and let them see what America is really doing.
Very good, thank you. I'd like to start with you. This next question: if you could sit down at the table with the counter protesters, what would you like them to know about you? What would you like them to know about why you're doing what you're doing with Black Unity?
That's such a crazy question because that's me and Ty specifically, I guess. Always, that's we love doing that. We love sitting with the counter protesters and talking to them because they need to understand and realize that we're people that are nice and articulate and have jobs, and it's just crazy because we talk to them so much. So when you ask that, I'm like, I want to talk about everything. Like I want to have endless conversations. I want them to know that like we believe all lives matter too. You know, we're like, we believe all lives matter but what we believe that Black lives matter as well. And that's a lot of people don't believe that. So that's I'm like lost for words because there's so much to talk about and there's so little time. But I think that one thing they need to understand is that they should not be afraid of change. They fear that the white race is going to be exterminated, but they don't think about the fact that that opens up doors for everyone to mix together and to have a world that's truly diverse. And that's exciting. That's something to celebrate. That's not something to fear. That's something to be like, oh shoot, like all lives do matter, you know? So I just feel like I can't even answer that. There's so much to it, but yeah, I think we should be talking more with them.
Very good. Thank you. Tyshawn?
I think for me, if I would ask them probably, like when they come out here with these flags and stuff like that and sing the national anthem, and then claim they're not racist, you know what I mean? To me, I just would ask them, like, why are the racist things that happen in America not make you angry when you say you're not racist? Like, that's probably like my biggest thing. Like things like people get mad like when people kneel for the national anthem, but then I'm like, well, there's a third part of the national anthem that is very racist, and things like that. It's like, if you're really about all lives mattering, why aren't these racist things that are happening and these racial injustices that are happening in America make you angry if you're truly not racist? So that's one thing that like I would want to know like from them, and also like just ask them like, do you understand why we are marching, and if not, do you want to know why we are marching and why the flag is triggering and why the national anthem is triggering? Like, are you willing to really learn and try to understand why we are doing the things we do? Because if you're not, but you're claiming that all lives matter, then you're contradicting your words. So that's
Okay, thank you. Very good. Martin?
Yeah, I think, one of the big things that I want these folks who are at the table to understand is that, hey, I've spent a lot of time in my community working with the youth. And what I've known and what I've known to be true in this community is that, a lot of these youth are, the sons and daughters and individuals of, these all life matter folks, of these folks, and they're trying to learn what their place is in the world, how they fit in, how they can interact with their friends, because when you're growing up, a lot of what a lot of the way you respond to folks isn't, something that's meant to be malicious. It's just a social experiment to learn what's right from wrong. And, when I'm sitting at this table, talking to the adults, I want them to, remember that, like, hey, I'm a community educator. I work with your kids. I want to make sure that your kids are safe. But I also want to make sure that, when I have kids, my kids are safe too. And I'm going to educate your kids on that. I'm going to always make sure that, those folks, the younger generation in this community understands that, they're people and everyone's equal, growing up. And that's something that they're going to be, that's something that they're going to bring into the community when they become our age, when they graduate from college, when they start to, take their first steps into American society and, create change however they see. So when I'm sitting in this community, when I'm sitting at this table, I want these folks to understand that I'm going to keep your kids safe. So I need you to just talk to me and tell me why you feel unsafe so I can help you understand where we're coming from.
Very good. Thank you. Morgan?
I don't have much to add because I think the three of them did a perfect job of really hitting everything that I would like to hit. But I would also just like to let them understand that I don't blame them for not being educated. It's not their fault. It's very similar to the situation that happened in South Africa during apartheid, where Nelson Mandela said that the people within the system are just as much victims of the system as the people who are being oppressed, because they've been brainwashed since birth to think a certain way. And when you come and you tell them and it's not their fault that they react this way, because you're telling them that something that they've been told is this is how things are, this is how things are worked. And when you tell them that that's actually incorrect, it shakes someone to their core, and you're destroying their core values in front of them. And it's very hard for a lot of people to handle. And any rational person who gets told that their core values are incorrect is going to sometimes react irrationally or very brashly. And so being able to sit down and have a conversation with these people and be like, hey, I understand I understand where you might be coming from. We can understand it, because I know personally that I thought I had a very thorough understanding of how racism worked in this country. And then something happened, and Trayvon Martin was killed, and I realized, oh no, it's not, racism isn't dead. There's still people are still killing 14-year-old black boys. And that situation was so scarring to this whole nation that me and my mother got into a fight when I was 15 over me wearing a hoodie when I went out on a walk, because I have insomnia. I can't sleep very much at night. The best way for me to calm down is to take a walk at night. And my mom didn't feel comfortable with me being a 15-year-old black man wearing a hoodie. And knowing that there are people like many of these counter protesters who, when they see a black person in a hoodie, they get scared, because of a lot of the brainwashing that's been done by the media to make them perceive people of color as violent or monsters and different things. And it's another part of the situation that we need to address as a whole, but is this something that's outside of Black Unity's scope at this moment, but is the fact that a lot of American media is brainwashing a lot of these people to think a certain way, and it's not really their fault. They're just victims of circumstance.
Thank you. Tayshawn?
Just a quick add on that. Another thing that I would ask is if you guys know that this police system that stands with systemic racism is oppressing people of color, you guys know that, then why are you trying to protect it so much? And honestly, I would feel like the answer to that question would be because it's a privilege to feel safe by the police. That is very much a privilege, and they don't want to give up that privilege of them feeling safe when the police are called. Like for me personally, like a lot of situations, I don't feel like I should call the police because I'm like, they're not gonna do anything. You know what I mean? So that's a privilege that that a lot of people of course specifically don't get to feel, because they don't feel like that police system is there to help them. And also, like another thing off of what Morgan was saying, God, I forgot it. But yeah, I forgot it.
Very good. Thank you. Kanaya, you're the only woman on this leadership panel tonight. You're a BIPOC woman. What are some things you'd like to say to the community at large about issues that are important to you, and that if you could say anything educational and helpful and useful, what might some of those statements be?
Well, for one, do not silence Black women. Stop silencing Black women. We're not aggressive, we're passionate. We're not aggressive, we're passionate. For the 15th time. That's one thing, is people have this view of Black women like we're always mad, we're always angry. But then again, the world puts us as a little tiny speck on the bottom of the totem pole, and then expects us to be happy and to not be mad. But when we do express ourselves, we're shut down. So I feel like I would love to have the community understand that we need love too. We need love. So there's so much, but that's one of the biggest things right now, is that show Black women some love, please.
Very good. If you were in a room full of city leaders, citizens, residents, community members, and you were introducing yourself for the first time regarding this work that you're doing with Black Unity, how would you like to introduce yourself so that people would understand the nature and the scope of your work and who you are individually and personally? Martin, I'll start with you.
So I guess it's kind of funny that you asked that question because like we all have specific roles within our organization within BU that we do, but we're all very passionate individuals. So like we like to make sure that we're uplifting each other in every possible way. And so I could come in and I could tell you my individual role in BU, but I feel like if I told you my individual role, that this precedence where, oh, I want to talk to this person more than I want to talk to that person, when that's not what I want to happen. That's not what that's not how I want people to see this. And so whenever I come into a room and I'm introducing myself as a part of the Black Unity movement and a part of the Black Lives Matter movement, I just say that I'm one of the organizers. I don't go into specifics. You don't need to know what I do specifically. You just need to know that I'm one of many who have a voice in this community who wants to make sure that everyone else's voices are heard.
Very good. Morgan?
Very similar to what Martin said, because when we came together to start this organization, we wanted to make sure that everyone understood that leadership was going to be lateral. There's not one person who has more say than anyone else. All of our meetings are done democratically. There's not a single thing that is done without everyone understanding what's going on and everyone getting a vote or a say on everything. And we make sure that and I don't think we've ever had a non-unanimous vote, because if it's not unanimous, we end up stopping and making sure that everyone understands what's going on. And then once everyone actually understands what we're trying to accomplish, it then becomes a unanimous vote immediately after that. And I think that's one of the greatest strengths of our organization, is that there is no one true leader. But if I would describe myself, I would just say community advocate and community organizer. And because I think that's really what encompasses everyone who's a part of the BU leadership, is that we come and we're advocates for the community, and we're also advocates, and we also are organizing the community into certain events.
Very good. Thank you. Tyshawn?
For me, probably just like the same thing like what Martin said. Basically, like when I come to the room, I just say like I'm an activist, organizer for Black Unity. I do a lot of educational stuff, so I do like to talk to the All Lives Matter people and the racist people, if they are racist, and stuff like that. So that's like pretty much like an educator. I do like to travel around, and I'm a protester as well. You know what I mean? I really do like to be in the streets. I like to protest. I like to be, for people to hear me, and for us to be around. And I feel like this message that like on a personal note, like that I personally have to tell people, I feel like is important for people to hear. And you know what I mean? I've been wanting to be an activist for my whole entire life, and this has been like a good opportunity to really dive into that like as much as I've wanted to, and see like the activists that have came before me that I look up to, how they've done it, how I can do it better, how I can do it like them. And so like getting to be like in the streets and protesting like in these different places, and being an educator, and really educating myself on things that I want to be able to teach, because I can't be an activist and tell people that I'm an activist or educator if I don't know what I'm talking about, if I don't know what I'm speaking to people. So just like an organizer, an activist, a student, basketball player, and an educator.
Very good. Thank you. Kanaya?
So I want to start by saying each one of these men right here in this group have taught me so much. Like, I'm here to learn, to be honest. I've learned so much from the other BU leaders and stuff, from the men, from the women, from everybody of all different colors and stuff. And that's something that I take very seriously. I want to educate myself too. So when I do speak, I'm speaking correctly to other people about this. But one thing that I've always been about is I don't like seeing people bullied practically. Like, I don't like seeing people of color specifically, because that has been the target, it seems, throughout our whole life. It's been people of color. So I've always been someone that speaks up. I don't like to sit there and be quiet. I think it's really dumb, and it's not what you should be doing. So I feel like my role in this is I want to give you the insight of what me as a Black woman has been through, and what other people don't express and stuff like that. And I want to try to use my words to help other people express their experiences. And by gaining all that information, like Tyshawn said, we can use that for the people that don't understand, like the All Lives Matter, and we can tell them our experiences. So maybe they will grasp onto like what it's truly like to be a minority and understand that better. But I feel like we shouldn't be silent until there's peace. So I feel like I'm just here until we can actually make a change. And then once we actually make a change, we can keep going to create the universe, the universe of the world that we want to see, you know?
I have one final question. We've got about 5 minutes left. If you could keep your answers to about 60 seconds or less if possible. You're in the room with the governor and her staff, the Oregon Senate and the Oregon House of Representatives. What would you ask them to do for the movement? And I'll start with you, Kanaya.
I'd ask them to use their voice. I know I keep going back to that, but I would ask them to listen. I would ask them to understand. I would ask them to really fully embrace themselves in the culture, in all different cultures, not just us. There's kids in cages right now. There's other things going on that it's so much bigger than just this little topic. And I feel like what people are not doing is listening. So I would ask them, maybe take a second and educate yourself, like Tyshawn was saying, because I feel like that goes with this answer as well.
Very good. Thank you. Tyshawn?
If I was in the room with them, I would 100%, I would tell them, look at the numbers, look at the stats, and we see that this world, the city, the state is corrupt, the police is corrupt, the judicial system is corrupt. Like, we see a lot of these things being corrupt and people are speaking out on them, and now we need you guys to take action. Like, there's been a lot of talk like, oh yeah, like this is in the works, or oh yeah, we see that this is a problem, we see that this is a problem, but there's not enough action that's being taken. Like, we've been talking about these problems for a long, long time, many, many years. People before us, you know what I mean, have talked about these problems, and there's still problems till this day. And they're the people that have the power to change those things. And now it's we're past the point to where we're doing all this talking. It's enough. We're done with the talking. We need action now.
Very good. Morgan?
I know I speak for a lot of people when I say that Black unity is no longer standing for broken promises by politicians. If you say you're an ally and you're gonna do things to help that are truly being allied and helping start policies and programs to actually help people of color, and it doesn't happen, we're not voting for you again. We're going to openly campaign against you and say this person said these things were going to happen to help people of color and they did not do that. Because personally, to me, as someone whose friend is studying to become a politician, when you start going for, okay, I'm now going to try and win my next election before the campaign season has even started, it shows me that you've given up on anything you tried to do during your term, that you've given up on whatever you're trying to do, and you're trying to sell yourself out for voters. And everyone knows if you really want to get something done as a politician, you're not going to get reelected. Everybody knows that. If you want to actually get something done, you have to swallow the fact that you're not going to get reelected. And we need more politicians who care more about policies and getting things done than actually getting reelected and making your hundreds of thousands of dollars that you get as a senator or representative, and the crazy amount of money that you get for giving speeches after you're done, and blah, 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 blah. All that money that's involved in politics is ridiculous. And the biggest thing that I would like to push for is to actually have a work on campaign finance reform. It's very important to get these campaign finance reforms figured out, along with gerrymandering, so we can stop having political parties that are purposely trying to prevent people of color from voting and accurately using their voice. Excuse my grandma.
Thank you. Martin?
Yeah. So I think there's really only two things that I would say. Knowing, hearing everything that my colleague said, I agree with them 100%. There are two things that just need to be said. One, if you are in this position of power and you see what's going on in this movement, you see this rise of a hate group that's coming to, try and squash the individuals of the movement, to try and kill the individuals who are championing the biggest change. You, as a public official, have to take a stand against that. You have to decry the violence that's coming from these extremists, especially these extremists who come from the Proud Boys, who come from these terrorist networks that are allowed to perpetuate in the system. You just have to say no to that, and you have to actively create legislation that prevents that from happening. The second thing that I would say is, at the end of the day, you know, by and large, a lot of the legislation that's written into law, it creates opportunities for one way, but it can also create opportunities for another way. You know, there are two different paths. But the fact is that, you know, it's not, you know, the legislation is what empowers people, but it's their mindset that really is what call, you know, create, gives them the call to create that action to do that, you know. And so it's like, wow, I feel like you know, this community is a dumb community, so I'm going to use, you know, what I have in power in this legislation to say, you know, this community is not worth living in. We can't have that happen anymore. That's not something that's okay, and that's something that needs to change. You have to look at that.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had with us tonight Martin, Kanaya, Tyshawn, and Morgan. I have found all four of them to be very reasonable, intelligent, articulate leaders of the BIPOC community, of the Black Unity Movement. I want to say to you, Martin and Kanaya, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you randomly when we bumped into each other the other last week. Martin?
So real quick, it wasn't actually Kanaya that you bumped into. It was me, myself, and Claire. We were doing some organizing for the Pride event that we were that we're hosting tomorrow.
Well, thank you. Well, Claire, we're going to give you an honorable mention, and thank you because the both of you were very, very warm and very open, and you were willing to speak. And that was the message that I was sharing with others, that your willingness to share your philosophy and wanting to connect and wanting to engage. And that's what I walked away from in that moment in time. So I was very excited. And to all those that have listened, to all those that will watch this, I'm asking you as a community leader in this city of Springfield to listen to their answers, to listen to their heart, to listen to their words. We all need to come together to have these crucial conversations that we can move forward together as a community, because we are all in this world together, whether we like it or not. And it's important that we find ways to help each other get across to the other side of the things that we're facing as just as people. And so Morgan, Tyshawn, Kanaya, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, so sorry. And Martin, I thank you tonight for your time. I thank you for your openness. I thank you for your generosity. And I just look forward to having future conversations with all of you once again. Again, the Springfield City Club wants to entertain your leadership team as a program. And we're looking forward to helping increase forums and increase dialogue and increase opportunities for your voices and your message to be heard. And so thank you all this evening, and I appreciate your time. All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.